Doesn't matter. It only seems like it does.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to this video. You probably already know what it is by the title, but this is actually really important, more important than you might think. We've talked a little bit about, making posters as a way to, gain the attention of your audience and to, whatever it is that you made. So sort of this invitation, and that applies to thumbnails in a major way. Honestly, a lot of times it could be as crucial as your content taking off or not being seen at all just based on your thumbnail. And before jumping into it, do me a favor and hit subscribe if you are interested in filmmaking content, breakdowns, and tutorials. There's definitely a lot more coming up and we'd love to have you. So click the bell, subscribe, like this video, and check out my website, Kriscoart.com. And over there we have a marketplace with brand new packs. And we actually have a sale going on right now from December 18th to December 28th. Okay, so what makes a good thumbnail? The main thing with a thumbnail is you have to look at it as, first of all, you need to get the eyeballs onto your thumbnail. The way you do that is, again, with the hook. So that initial stage is literally focusing it down. And then once you have that attention, you need to keep it long enough for a click, meaning that once your thumbnail is seen, it needs to not just stand out, but it needs to also say something. It needs to set a certain level of stakes. It needs to give a certain amount of information, a certain amount of tease, and that's what's gonna give you that click. Thumbnails are important. Okay, we get it. But now, how can we make important looking thumbnails? I was trying to make a segue, that didn't really work, but let's just make good thumbnails and let's talk about how we can do that in Photoshop. Now, this video is sponsored by XP Pen, but let me just say that their sponsorship is a great support for the channel, but it doesn't go beyond that. Like, I wouldn't be using their product if I didn't genuinely believe in them, and you're about to see what a difference it is to actually use a tablet that you can draw on to create your thumbnails rather than just clicking around in a very jagged way with your cursor and your mouse. So huge shout out to XP Pen. That's what I'll be using. So if you're curious, because I know I'm gonna get questions, because this tablet, as you're about to see, is amazing, just know that I'm using the XP Pen 15.6 inch Pro. I think it is, but it's a Pro one. It's a tablet, you could draw on it, that's what matters, and it also has custom buttons. We're gonna look at all that, but let me show you a way to download thumbnails from your existing videos straight from YouTube, so you don't have to browse through your documents and your messy folders, because I know you're messy. But okay, so we're gonna click on the channel icon that you have on the right hand top corner of your YouTube page. You're not gonna go to your channel, you're gonna go to YouTube Studio. This, of course, is where you access all your back-end YouTube stuff. If you are a YouTuber, you've been uploading videos, you probably know what this is. But let's go to content. By the way, it used to be called videos, it just changed it to content. That's pretty interesting. Over here, you have to actually go under details, as if you're editing the video. Now, if you scroll to the bottom here, you can see that you can upload a thumbnail, a custom thumbnail, if you don't already have one. And you can either change the thumbnail or you can download the thumbnail. So when you download the thumbnail, it's gonna open it up to a new screen, a new web page, and you can just right click on it, save image as, save it wherever you want. And now you have a starting point as far as, a previously uploaded thumbnail that you can now modify and play on top of. So of course, if you have the original file, that's better because you're always going to be downloading a JPEG that was optimized for the YouTube size limit for thumbnails, but we're still making a thumbnail nonetheless, so it doesn't really matter. No one's going to notice those 2 pixels missing in resolution or that compression. So let's jump into Photoshop and let's see how we can take things up a notch. And that's from the first thing that we're going to talk about right now, which is adding graphic weight, adding separation, and adding contrast and depth between the elements that are in your thumbnail to, again, add a sense of dimension. And I'm gonna just bring that thumbnail in here, and because I have a pen, I can actually trace the edges and actually give them a little bit of an edge light that wasn't there, or that was there, but that we can actually enhance what is in the scene to, again, make it pop even more. Yeah, just kind of draw those outlines as best as you can. And we're gonna take a few copies of this and we're gonna play with a little bit of blurring, and I'm gonna keep adding masks once that effect is applied, so I can actually delete parts of it or hide parts of it within the mask, so that the blurring edge stays within the subject and doesn't go outside its border, because that looks more like a glow and we don't want that. We're trying to edge light him. So the main thing to focus on here is that we're trying to literally draw on edge, just like you would in a cartoon or a graphic. You just literally trying to draw something that can outline in a way that separation that is happening from something that is in your foreground to the rest of your background, which may not be as important. And yeah, we can already tell a big difference here. Just for me quickly doing it right now as an example, you can see that now the subject stands out quite a bit more, and this image is a lot easier to read, just because before it already, tonally we're dealing with a lot of similar contrasts. It's a pretty wide shot, so you don't have out of focus blurry background. It wouldn't really make sense for this type of shot. So using this way of using light and outlining is a great way to add that sense of separation. You could probably make a lot of your thumbnails pop just on that alone, but let's make them pop even more. But the main idea here is that you duplicate your footage. We're gonna pretty much isolate our subject just by using a mask. So we're gonna literally draw and isolate him from the rest of the background. And once we have those two layers separated, we can go in the background layer, which should be below this new layer that you isolated. And in there, we can apply whatever blurring effect pleases your heart. Literally, it could be just a simple Gaussian blur, however way you say that. Or it could be a directional blur, depending on the type of effect and blurring that you would like. Play around with them. You can use obviously the lens blur, which is the most accurate one in Photoshop. And there you go, you're set. You got a fake depth of field that you've added later on into your image, which again creates a really nice separation. Now, you have to pick and choose when you're using this, but it's a very powerful tool to have. And just as we did with blurring the background, we can also just sharpen the foreground, or the main element that we want people to pay attention to. So I'm gonna actually take away the blur effect, and I'm actually gonna select the top layer of our subject, and I'm gonna add on sharp mask to that layer. And I can play around with these settings. There's a very useful preview checkbox that you can check and uncheck just to get a sense of what the before and after is of what you're affecting in your image. And once you find a good spot, don't go too crazy, because you might have some nasty haloing effect if you go too hard on this. But once you find that sweet spot, you can definitely tell that you can make a lot of your thumbnails stand out way more just by adding more sharpness and detail to the parts that matter. Again, all of this is just to kind of force the eye into the very first key piece of information that is going to act as the hook. You're not trying to show how beautiful your thumbnails are just by showing a beautiful image. You need to be very efficient within that image to have that one standing out element that is going to act as your hook. So not the overall image, you just want to pick one thing that can very easily guide the audience's eye right there to that part of the thumbnail, and then from there it can open up to the rest of the thumbnail that can still look beautiful, could have all the other elements that you want. But that initial sort of, again, these tricks to visually create that hook is really, really important. Now let's have some fun, because Photoshop actually introduced some new neural filters, and they're really powerful because they use AI to even create atmosphere and fog and other things that again create that extra layer of separation. I think these are really interesting, especially because they've just been announced. So I'm just gonna play a little bit around with that and just show you what you can do, ways of incorporating that stuff with thumbnails. So I really love this like fog or haze filter because it's another very quick way of adding that separation literally in a few clicks. You don't even have to isolate the subject or isolate the things that you want to. The AI and Photoshop will just know, which is pretty crazy where things are going. But of course, you can take these principles. For example, if you don't have the latest version of Photoshop or whatever the case is, you can still use that initial trick that we just saw with separating the subject from the background, and you can literally add a gray solid or a bluish solid and add it as a tint to the background and lower the transparency, and that can be another way of adding that separation. The main thing with the idea of separating things is, again, just making it easy on the eyes and dialing it in. So okay, before jumping into the last tips of this video, I just want to let you know what I'm actually doing with this tablet in case you're curious about getting one yourself. One of the benefits are these buttons right here on the pen itself. Is it gonna focus? Oh, it did it for a second. stand out. It picks up my face right away. Okay, cut to B-roll. Okay, so it has these like buttons on the side here, which are, I mean, amazing just to have that quick access as you're drawing, and you don't even have to move your hand or do nothing. You can literally, as you're going, switch to, for example, an eraser and start erasing things. But you can have a lot more control of what you're doing right within the tablet because it has these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons that you can customize. It's pretty crazy. And then also you have this dial wheel here, which is great because sometimes you want certain functions not as a pressable button, but you actually want a dial feel because, for example, brush size, it's a lot more intuitive to use a dial that you can spin to increase or decrease that brush size. And again, it all fits so well because if you're right-handed, or it doesn't matter which way because you can flip the tablet, but let's say, like me, you're right-handed, you're drawing with your right hand, and then you can just have access to all these things with your other hand. And the way you start moving with things like this in Photoshop, it becomes lightning fast. Working in this way, you're gonna be like, why was I using a mouse for this stuff all along, all this time? That's what I'm asking myself, to be honest. If you're interested, link is in the description. Right now they're having a huge sale for Christmas, so take advantage of that. Okay, now this is going to be less technical and more of certain ideas that you can apply to your thumbnails. But one thing is, if you're starting a brand, be very conscious of how you are representing that brand or how you want that brand to be represented. So I'll just take my own example, just because that's mainly the main thing that I know. My journey as a filmmaker is kind of at the center of the way that all this material is presented. So with being aware of that, you know, rather than being, for example, a tech company or something else that it's more about the product or there's something else that it's in the forefront, those are conscious decisions that you need to figure out way before you're creating thumbnails for your content. You know, that's a whole thing on branding that could be a whole other video, which we do have on this channel if you're interested in starting off in branding. But the reason I bring this up is because, for example, if I am the personality behind the brand, and this is something that, by the way, I just started doing, I'm going to try to put my face in the thumbnails as much as possible. And this is something that you've seen well-established YouTubers do all the time. And that is because now YouTube, and this gets trickier for my channel, but YouTube right now, it's personality based. It's people wanting to connect with others or people wanting to learn from others, not from a topic. They want to learn from others. They want to have that personable connection with someone and spend their time with someone. And again, this is more personality based, but that is an element to include in your thumbnails that you should definitely just have in mind. And if it's not your vibe and your style, that is totally cool. But it's something that can be really powerful in the long term. The more and more that you do that, if you know you're going to be the personality and sort of the host behind the content, to make that recognizable, to establish that more personal connection. Now, one other thing is I would test thumbnails. You know, upload a video or different test videos. So you can actually maybe upload, you know, thumbnail A 1 month and see how that performs. Then you switch it to thumbnail B and see if the algorithm picks that up in a different way. A/B testing or ABCD testing, depending on how deep you want to go down that route, is something that is so powerful in the internet age. Once you get into ads, marketing, that's all it is. To figure out your audience and to figure out what clicks, literally, you need to do a lot of A/B testing, and that applies to thumbnails as well. So something to keep in mind, and one of the things that you can really play around with, and I'll leave you with this, in these A/B testings, is also text. You know, a lot of times you have real estate in the first 2 or 3 lines of your description and your title, and that's hugely important. But a lot of times the biggest thing that really stands out in a search or in a homepage is the thumbnail and text that could potentially be in that thumbnail. Like if you have text in a thumbnail, most likely you're going to read that before you read the full title. So you can use that to your advantage, or it could also be a disadvantage. This is more subjective based on your audience and based on your type of content. But a lot of times, if you want to get a really, you know, for some videos that have a really quick attention grabbing keywords or things that you can insert into the thumbnail, that is something that you can test and play around with. So with that being said, that covers everything I wanted to share on thumbnails. I did make a video that is a little bit longer, a little bit more detailed on, like, if you're more or less starting off in Photoshop and you just want to create good thumbnails. I have a full more just full-length tutorial on just that you can check out. And if you're completely new to Photoshop and you want to start somewhere, I have a Learn Photoshop in 20 minutes, maybe it's 40 minutes. I gotta make a 20-minute version, but for now you have that. You can learn Photoshop in one go. And yeah, thanks again XP Pen for sponsoring this video. Maybe check out my packs too, you know, while you're in the links browsing, Kriscoart.com/marketplace, because we just released a new shadows texture with 111 shadow elements, and some of which are actually moving shadows that you can add into the background of your videos, into maybe scenes that look a little bland if you have a wall that's a little, you know, boring. But we also have you know, your typical light hits and lens flares that really help a ton with VFX, as well as particles, which is a collection of particles to create atmosphere, to add dust into your environment. It's good stuff. I use it a lot, so, you know, of course I would tell you it's good stuff, but it is. With that being said, my name is Chris Trini for Kriscoart, and I'll see you next time.